Bristol needs to prove it can build big projects, because so many things have been planned and been sabotaged in the past.
Sabotage? Like what?
Well,
that's a very strong word to use, Fabian, isn't it? Sabotage.
Okay, the last time there was a tram system that was mooted, it was going to end at Almesbury, I think, and then right at the last minute, when it's too late to do anything, certain individuals then in Power in South Gloucestershire insisted on the route being diverted to Cribbs Causeway, and had they said that right from the start, it wouldn't have been an issue. But because they said it right at the last minute, it was too late, and the whole thing collapsed, because there just wasn't the money to redo all the work that, so things like that.
Frustrating, yeah. Anyway, one of the big national infrastructure projects, we've just had Lord Adonis resign from the committee that runs infrastructure, which I was not surprised at, having seen some of the problems that are going on with his pet project HS2, which seems to be hitting the buffers before even the first sleeper has been laid for it. And I had a chat to a former civil engineer, transport and land use planner. He's retired, and he's spent quite a lot of his retirement doing freedom of information requests on HS2, and his name is John Marriott, and I spoke to him on Wednesday evening this week, and here's what he has to say about the project.
One of the things that I was trying to get them to admit was the fact that speed and capacity were related, such that when you went fast, capacity went down. They failed to produce anything that supports their claim, which is not surprising because it's wrong. On the forecasts, they refuse to produce any forecast because they claim it's commercially sensitive. But Network Rail, back in 2013, produced some estimates of what they thought the forecast would be between various cities. And if you compare those forecasts with the sort of number of trains that HS2 are proposing, you find that some trains are very empty, particularly something, say, like Birmingham to Manchester, where the flow is something like about 1,000 people per day, and they're proposing something like 17,000 seats a day, 2 trains an hour, which is huge overcapacity. And the train between Birmingham and Manchester can only stop at a station near Birmingham Airport if it gets built, but that's not currently part of the current scheme and not included in the costs. One of the things that HS2 does is when it gets to a bend, instead of being able to use the bend that was on the original Great Central Railway line, they're proposing to straighten it out because the speed, they trying to design it for 400 kilometres an hour, 250 miles an hour, which requires bends with a radius of over 9 kilometres. Whereas once you get the speeds down to something more sensible, and in fact 250 kilometres per hour, 150 mile an hour, is regarded by the International Union of Railways as a high-speed line. So instead of going for 150, HS2 are trying to go for 250 miles an hour. That, not only makes the line expensive because it has to be straight and it can't miss anything, it knocks loads of things down, but it also puts the costs up. And in fact, there are no 250 mile an hour trains around. And although they're saying it's future-proof for that, the power supplies aren't up to driving trains at that sort of speed. What they tried to claim originally, when they said they decided they wanted a new line, was that it only costs 9% more to go at 250 miles an hour than it did to go at 125. Now, the basis for that estimate was completely flawed because they just made wild guesses about how much extra it would cost to go at double the speed. And when you look at what they included in that estimate, it was completely fictitious and bogus. You can see from the costs that are coming out that the true cost of going double the speed is probably double.
Well, that's incredible, really, isn't it, that they didn't seem to have any idea about the lack of capacity that's caused by trying to go so fast on these trains, because they will then take several miles to stop if they're going 250 miles an hour. The publicfinance.co.uk site has had a story over Christmas where they're saying that high-speed, actually it's 18th of December this, high-speed rail HS2 lacks basic financial controls, that £1.76 million of unauthorised payments could have been avoided with tighter financial controls controls. Public Accounts Committee has said that they don't have any basic financial controls, and they're also being very secretive, Fabian.
Yeah, I mean, what I find offensive is that, money's being thrown at this, and as the speaker you've just had has said, it's all wild guesses, and yet the funding for, they've axed the funding for a direct electric rail service electrification to Bristol Temple Meet. So we're going to have to put up with, the electric service will stop at Chippenham, and we'll have to have hybrid trains. It's a real insult. They can't even, they can spend money on this, demolish everything in its path,
run through
and
some
not
of the
even
things.
give us a direct electric rail service to London from Bristol.
Let me just summarise what John Marriott was saying there. He's saying that the forecasts are all wrong, that the Birmingham to Manchester part of HS2, it looks as if it will be only 1 in 17 seats will actually be filled on that train from Birmingham to Manchester.
Then, is it?
So, I mean, imagine that during non-peak hours. You're talking about possibly entire carriages empty, because they haven't actually done their figures properly on the demand for it.
It's grotesque.
They're building stations out of the city centres, exactly opposite of what we were thinking about Temple Meads there, and interchanges like that. And also that they're building this thing for 250-mile-an-hour trains that don't exist. And then they're saying, oh, well, they will by the time it's finished. And then they're building in the power transformers and stuff at a lower power than that could drive trains at 250 miles an hour, Martin. It just looks as if this maybe like Hinkley Point is some sort of enormous project that's just been, various government people have just signed up to it, and they haven't really even had a proper look.
Well, I think the other thing is the conception of it is that if you've got a faster train between London and Birmingham, that's going to help Birmingham. But what can happen with these things is that you actually suck. It just means it's faster for resources to be sucked to London from Birmingham. So it doesn't actually work in the way you think it's going to work. And in any case, if you're going to do infrastructure, it makes sense to my mind to do lots of small things, moderate-sized projects. Whereas if you get it wrong, you've got it wrong, but you've not bet the farm on it. And the obvious thing to do is to create linkages, for example, between Manchester and Leeds. That's the sort of thing I would look at doing, rather than putting everything into London. If you want to build up infrastructure, the obvious place to do it is actually in the peripheral regions which lack infrastructure.
The costs have also exploded with HS2. One independent transport campaigner before Christmas said that the cost is up to £111 billion. Is this ever going to happen, Martin, do you think?
Well, it may be. The problem with these big projects like Hinkley and like HS2 is once you've spent millions and millions of pounds on getting the whole thing going, you then get path dependent on it. If you decide to cancel it, you're going to end up losing all the money you've already spent on it. So this is Milton Friedman's argument against government intervention in general, is that the problem is that you just end up spending more than you intended, and you can't back out of it, and then they keep coming back for more.
But sometimes you need to accept that you can't you've got to stop throwing good money after bad.
Well, you do, but I mean, obviously, there's a tendency for that to be a very difficult decision to make, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, and also it's worth pointing out that HS2 does absolutely nothing for Bristol. If anything, if it's a success, shall we say, it will simply take all the energy, London, Birmingham, and the north, and we'll just be completely forgotten at the other end of the M4.